Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. If you've been following the channel, you'll know for the last 6 months or so, we've been talking a lot about the financial implications of Russia's invasion of Ukraine on the global economy. And we've talked about a variety of different issues, including inflation, the price of oil and gas and commodities, what's been going on with regards to global supply chain, the issues with regards to Russia changing to India and China as its main markets. So there's been a massive amount of information that we've been through. But the heart of all of this, the fundamental issue that's driving all of these problems, is the fact that there's a war going on in Ukraine right now. Russia went in with its tanks and its military and decided to occupy some of the land that was previously designated as Ukraine. And whilst that war is going on, we will continue to have fallout in terms of the economics and all of the knock-on problems that we've got all around the world. So in today's video, I want to talk about the war itself and try to establish when we think this war is going to end. And I recently posted a video that was talking about Ukraine's recent gains, where they've managed to take back over 6,000 square kilometers. And there is a question now as to whether or not Russia is losing momentum. And in this video, I want to show you some really interesting footage, which reportedly shows a private military company in Russia reportedly trying to recruit convicts to join the war effort on Russia's behalf. So we'll have a look at that. We'll have a talk around those issues. We'll also look at the recruitment efforts that Russia are putting in officially. They are offering big money for men to join up and go to Ukraine to fight in this war. We'll have a look at the resources that both Russia and Ukraine had at the start of this conflict and what the estimated losses have been. And then finally today, I'll wrap up with my summary. So what I think is likely to happen over the course of the next 3 to 6 months. And of course, we're going into the winter period in Ukraine. So that's going to be a critical time for this war. What the ongoing implications of all of this are for Russia and the global economy. So before we get started on all of that, if I could ask you to give me a thumbs up at some point during this video, if you're enjoying the content. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. I'm on a push to try to get to 200,000 subscribers, so if you could help, that would be great. Don't forget, I always include chapters in these videos, so if there's a section that you're not that interested in or you don't have time to watch the whole video, you can skip over stuff. And if you'd like to support the channel, please have a look below where you'll find links to YouTube, Super Thanks and membership, as well as Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon and Amazon links. In order to answer the question as to how long this war is likely to go on for, I thought it was worth looking at the resources that Russia has available to it. And to put this war into context, I thought it was worth comparing those resources directly to Ukraine. Global Firepower is an online database that's been operating since 2006 and compares the military strength of 142 countries. If we start off with a very simple metric, the total population of Russia is around 142 million, and that compares to about 44 million for Ukraine. So Russia is the 9th largest country in the world, Ukraine the 34th. If we scroll down to active personnel, you can see that Russia currently has active armed forces of around 850,000 compared to 200,000 for Ukraine. So Russia is ranked as the 5th largest military power by personnel and Ukraine number 20. In addition to the active personnel, Russia has around 250,000 reserves. So these are people that have served in the armed forces within the last 5 years that could be called up and sent into battle at relatively short notice. Now it's interesting to note that the reserve numbers in Ukraine match those from Russia. So despite having a much smaller army, it has bigger reserves. And one of the reasons for that is that Ukraine has been on alert for a long period of time. Since the invasion and subsequent annexation of Crimea in 2014, Ukraine has been concerned about another Russian invasion, and quite rightly so with hindsight. If we look at the financials, defense spending in Russia is more than $150 billion. It's the 3rd largest in the world, compared with Ukraine, which is coming in at just below $12 billion and ranked number 20. If we look at the air power potential that both countries have, Russia is entirely dominant. At the start of this conflict, Russia officially had 772 fighter aircraft and was ranked at number 3 globally, compared with 69 for Ukraine and a ranking of 32nd. And in terms of dedicated attack aircraft, it actually is ranked at number 2 with 739, compared with a ranking of 17 and 29 aircraft for Ukraine. And this is a really interesting part of the conflict because it was expected that Russia would have total dominance in terms of the airspace. But that hasn't actually transpired. Russia took a number of big hits, and since that point, it hasn't really looked to dominate in the air. The situation with regards to helicopters is very similar. At the start of this conflict, Russia was recorded as having more than 1,500 helicopters and 544 attack helicopters, which put it number 2 globally. And that compares to a ranking of 18th for Ukraine with 34 attack helicopters. Now, in terms of land power, this is Russia's primary strength. Russia has the most tanks of any country in the world. At the start of this conflict, it officially had 12,420 tanks, and that compared to 2,596 for Ukraine. It also had over 30,000 armoured vehicles compared to 12,000 for Ukraine, and over 6,500 self-propelled artillery compared to just around 1,000 for Ukraine. Russia also had the most towed artillery and mobile rocket projectors of any country in the world. But it's interesting to note that Ukraine's ranking on all of these measures is significantly higher than its global ranking. And this, I think, relates to the fact that Ukraine was concerned about having some form of land battle and therefore had been preparing for this eventuality. So whilst Ukraine is ranked as the 34th largest country from a population point of view, and the 20th from the number of people in its army, it's ranked at number 13 in terms of the number of tanks, 12th for the number of mobile rocket projectors, and 6th for armoured vehicles and self-propelled artillery. So when you look at the resources of what both countries have, you would have expected that this was not a fair fight, that Russia should have walked in and been able to establish dominance very quickly. And because of what happened in Crimea in 2014, when very few shots were fired, when Russia annexed the whole area, I think it was expected by the Russians that there wouldn't be that much resistance, and this would be a relatively quick and painless military conflict. But unfortunately for everybody in the world, that hasn't proved to be correct, and we've still got an ongoing conflict right now, around 7 months after the initial invasion started. It's difficult to get detailed analysis of the level of losses that Russia have encountered since this war started. Russia are not officially posting any figures, so are having to go with estimates that are being made by a variety of different sources. Now, this information is an estimate put together by -rush.com and provides a daily update on the estimated losses for the Russian forces. So you can see that the latest estimate as of the 20th of September is that 54,810 Russian personnel have been killed, 164,430 wounded, and 1,000 have been taken prisoner, which equates to total losses of 220,240. Now, based on these figures, that would mean that Russia has lost around 25% of all of its active serving personnel in this battle so far. And that's really one of the reasons why Russia is now having to recruit to replenish all of the people on the front line. Now, in terms of the estimated cost for Russia, if you've been following the channel, you'll know that I've posted a few videos talking about the likely losses that Russia have incurred. And it's been estimated that the loss of a single life equates to a loss of around $500,000 to the Russian economy over the lifetime of that person. So essentially, they would generate income through their work and all of the contributions to Russia of $500,000. So if you apply that ballpark figure to the number of people who've been killed and wounded, so around 200,000, that would equate to over $100 billion of lost GDP as a direct result of these people no longer being able to contribute to the Russian economy. So that really gives you a flavour as to the damage that this war is causing to the long-term prospects for Russia. And moving down through these numbers, you can see that the number of armoured combat vehicles lost so far by Russia is over 4,700, which equates to more than a third of their portfolio. The number of tanks lost is over 2,200. They've lost over 1,300 pieces of artillery, over 250 aircraft, which equates to almost 20%, more than 200 helicopters, and 15 ships and boats. Now, again, to put some context onto this in terms of the costs, there's obviously a wide spread of costs and it depends on exactly the specification. But on average, artillery and armoured vehicles are estimated to cost around $1 million per piece. So the loss of 4,700 armoured vehicles and 1,300 pieces of artillery equates to a total investment cost of around $6 billion. Tanks can cost anywhere between $2 million and $4 million per piece. But if we assume the tanks that have been lost are at the lower end of that spectrum, that would still equate to around $4.5 billion of investment. The cost of an attack helicopter can be anywhere between $10 and $15 million. So the loss of over 200 is an investment cost of over $2 billion. But the single most expensive piece of equipment here are the fighter jets, which cost in the region of $85 million per piece. And if Russia has lost 250 of these aircraft, that would equate to a total investment cost of around $21 billion. So Russia has encountered some serious losses so far in terms of both equipment and personnel. And if it intends to continue with this conflict for the long term, it will need to recruit more people. At the end of August, Vladimir Putin signed a decree to increase the number of armed combat personnel by 137,000. The decree did not stipulate how the increase in headcount was to be achieved, but instructed the government to assign the corresponding budget. Now, following this decree, there's been some calls by a number of senior Russians for a full mobilization, to have a full-scale recruitment of people to send them to the front line in Ukraine. Mikhail Sheremet, a State Duma deputy from the ruling United Russia Party, has been quoted as saying a full mobilization was necessary for victory. And the Communist Party leader has followed up these comments by stating, "Most of all, we need maximum mobilization of our strength and resources in order to win what he called a war against the United States, Europe and NATO." And a former Russian security services officer, Igor Girkin, who led the original separatist insurgency in East Ukraine in 2014, has recently posted on Telegram that mobilization is Russia's last chance at victory in Ukraine. Now, the official party line is that no mobilization is necessary, and Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov was recently quoted as saying there was no discussion on mobilization at the moment. However, despite these denials, Russian military are now on the streets of Russia trying to recruit people directly by offering them really attractive financial packages.
We can consider Russian citizens and foreigners aged 18 to 60 and fit for military service with at least a high school education. Now, usually, patriotically minded citizens are choosing to sign contracts for 3 or 6 months to take part in these special military operations.
Soldiers in camouflage and black masks showed their guns to interested passers-by and handed out colour brochures titled "Military Service on a Contract, the Choice of a Real Man." The minimum monthly wage on offer is 160,000 rubles, which equates to around $2,700, which is almost 3 times the national average. So this is a very attractive package financially. So it's a really interesting dynamic right now, because we've got a lot of senior people in Russia who are demanding mobilization. They're calling for people to be recruited, to be sent to the front line. But the official party line is that there is no mobilization, they don't need to bring up any more people. But what's happening on the streets of Russia seems to contradict what the official line is right now. And one really interesting development here is that it's been reported that a private military outfit, so a group of mercenaries called WAGNER, have been trying to recruit people directly from Russian prisons to go to the front line and fight in Ukraine. Wagner is reported to be the brainchild of Dmitry Utkin, who's a Russian veteran who fought in the Chechen Wars, a former Special Forces officer and a lieutenant colonel of the GRU, Russia's military intelligence service. It's been reported that Wagner started operating in Syria in 2015, fighting alongside pro-government forces and guarding oil fields, and has been active in Libya since 2016. It was reported to have been invited into the Central African Republic in 2017 to guard diamond mines, and also reported to be working in Sudan protecting gold mines. The United Nations and French government have accused Wagner mercenaries of committing rapes and robberies against civilians in the Central African Republic, and the EU has imposed sanctions as a result. In 2020, the US military accused Wagner mercenaries of having planted landmines and other improvised explosive devices in and around the Libyan capital Tripoli. So Wagner is quite a secretive organisation and not a lot is known about them, and officially they're not acting for Russia. But let's have a look at a video that was taken recently at a prison in Russia.
Наверное, слышали, ЧВК «Вагнер» называется. Война тяжелая. На всякие там чеченские и так далее близко не похоже. Расход боеприпасов у меня приблизительно в 2,5 раза больше, чем в Сталинграде. Первый грех – это дезертирство. Никто не дает заднюю. Никто не отступает. Никто не сдается в плен. Когда вы будете обучаться, при сдаче в плен вам расскажут 2 гранаты, которые вы должны иметь с собой. Второй грех – это алкоголь, наркотики. В зоне боевых действий. Пока полгода вы с нами, вы все время в зоне боевых действий. И третий грех – это мародерка, включая сексуальные контакты с местными женщинами, флорой, фауной, мужчинами, там, с кем угодно. Минимальный возраст, который мы берем, это 22 года. Если моложе, бумажка от ближайших родственников, что они не против. Максимальный возраст, условно, это 50 лет, но если крепкий, прямо здесь на собеседовании делаем элементарные тесты, смотрим, насколько крепок, физическая форма крайне необходима. Смотрим, насколько ты крепок, и тогда принимаем решение и берем. Первые заключенные, которые воевали со мной, это было 1 июня, штурм Угледарской ТЭЦ, 40 человек из Питера, строгий режим, рецидив. 40 человек зашло в окопы противника, вырезали его ножами, было 3 погибших, 7 раненых. С 3 погибших одному было 52 года, отсижена 30-ка. Погиб геройски. Мы внимательно относимся к тем, кто сидит по 228, исключительно исходя из того, была зависимость или нет. Если есть вопросы, оставляем за собой право, пока мы готовимся к тому, чтобы вас забрать, провести полиграф и задать вопросы, насколько человек устойчив. Мы очень аккуратно относимся к тем, кто сидит по сексуальным статьям, но понимаем, что бывают ошибки.
So it seems from this video that Wagner are recruiting criminals directly from prison, people who have got long-standing prison sentences. It's trying to get them to go and fight in Ukraine. And in exchange for doing that, it's offering them a pardon. So this is obviously a special deal that's been set up by the authorities to enable these hardened criminals to get out of jail, go and fight in Ukraine for 6 months, and then at the end of that period they get a full pardon if they make it through the war in one piece. And obviously this throws up a whole lot of questions because these individuals are not from the armed forces. These are not reservists who are waiting for retraining to go to the front line. These are people who've been convicted of some criminal offences who are in prison on a long-term basis. So I don't know exactly what they're in prison for, but it's obviously quite serious. And they're taking these individuals directly to Ukraine to fight on behalf of Wagner and Russia. Now, I've no idea what level of training these people are being given, but I would imagine that it won't be long enough or detailed enough to give these people the training that they need to be able to go into combat. And that obviously raises the question as to whether or not this should be allowed. Should you be able to take people from prison and send them straight into a war? But on the flip side of this, from a humanitarian perspective, Wagner have been accused of various atrocities and war crimes in the past. And if you're an institution with a questionable history, you have to wonder whether or not recruiting new people directly from prison who are actually convicted criminals, so you know these people have committed various serious offences in the past, is that really the right recruitment policy here? So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because we're getting to a point in this war where Russia is starting to lose ground. For the first time since April, Russia has lost large swathes of Ukraine and it's being pushed back. And Ukraine is now really pushing forward. It's receiving a lot of financial and military support from NATO and the West. And every day we're hearing more news that everybody is committing more in terms of financial budget. So it looks like the West and Ukraine are really upping the ante. They're trying to finish off Russia. They're trying to force them back and to draw some sort of conclusion to this conflict. So Russia is now under pressure, and it's losing people and it's losing equipment. This war has definitely not gone the way that President Putin was expecting. There is no way that Russia were budgeting for this level of losses at this point in the game. And the big question is, what does President Putin do now? Now, officially back in Russia, this is a special military operation, so it's not a war. So he doesn't want to start recruiting people officially. He doesn't want to go on a national mobilization campaign. So Russia is now doing this under the radar. So they are recruiting on the streets. They're trying to bring in men between 18 and 60. But they're doing it on a low-key basis. So this isn't on headline news in Russia. They're not calling all men to arms. But unofficially, they're trying to get as many people onto that front line as possible. And the fact that Russia is using organizations like Wagner shows that they're really desperate to get as many people in that front line as possible. And if you're recruiting soldiers who are serving prison sentences, they're convicted felons, then that obviously shows that there's a level of desperation here. So from the detailed information that we've been through in this video, it's clear that Russia are losing a lot of equipment. And so they're going to run short on resources. So it will be interesting to see whether or not they change their tactics, whether they try to deploy more missiles, whether they bring in more fighter jets, or try to do something that really changes the perspective of the war. Because as it stands at the moment, they're losing ground, they're losing people, they're losing equipment, and eventually they may lose the war. But if Russia decides that it wants to keep throwing more and more people at it, it could go on for at least the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. Impossible to call. But what we do know is that the longer that this war goes on, the bigger the impact will be on the global economy. We're already moving towards a global recession. It's likely that that's going to come at the start of 2023. And if Russia persists with this war, if they carry on, they dig in and just keep going, then the forthcoming recession could be one of the worst that we've seen in the last 30 years. This could be really quite serious. So for everybody's sake, it would do us all a favour if Russia decided that it wanted some form of ceasefire, to come around the table and talk about some form of peace agreement. But that doesn't look like it's happening. It looks more likely that Russia is going to carry on recruiting people unofficially at the moment, keep sending people over to Ukraine, keep this war going as long as possible. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, we're coming now towards the winter period in Ukraine. Over the next few months, it's going to get very cold and a lot more difficult for Russia to keep their supply lines going, to keep the people at the front line supplied with ammunition and food. So that's going to be a really big challenge for Russia. And what we know is that Ukraine are really fighting back hard right now. They see the next 3 months as being the pivotal point in this war. If Russia can make it through until the spring, then I think it's very likely that the war will carry on all the way through 2023. So it's likely that Ukraine and the West will throw everything they have at this over the next few months to try to bring some form of conclusion to the matter. And if that does happen, then that's the best possible outcome for the global economy. If Russia make it through this winter period, then I think we're all looking at a very grim 2023. So hopefully you found today's video useful, informative, and slightly thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already.